Let us begin by turning our attention inward, not outward, towards society's expectations or religious dogma, but inward, to the soul, to the psyche, where the true battle takes place. When we speak of demons, especially in the context of masturbation or any form of temptation, we're not speaking of horned creatures lurking in the shadows. No, the real demons are much closer. They wear our faces. They speak with our voices, and more dangerously, they whisper through our unconscious thoughts. Carl Jung taught that the human psyche is not a singular, unified being, but a complex system filled with competing forces. Among these forces lies the shadow, the part of us that we hide, reject, and often demonize. It's where our shame lives, where our anger, our lust, our envy, and our guilt go to hide when they're not accepted in the light of our social masks. And make no mistake, it is precisely because we repress these aspects of ourselves that they gain their power. Repression does not destroy energy, it stores it, and the more we push something down, the more violently it may rise when we least expect it. This is why so many people feel enslaved to habits like compulsive masturbation. They believe they are simply weak, or broken, or sinful. But in truth, what they are facing is not just a habit. It is a confrontation with their shadow. The sexual impulse, when unexamined, becomes a playground for our unacknowledged emotions. It becomes the escape hatch through which we flee our loneliness, our insecurity, our fear of intimacy, and even our unprocessed trauma. And here is where the demon appears, not to destroy us, but to demand our attention. You see, a man or woman who is at war with their own desires will never know peace. They may succeed in moments of suppression, but suppression is not transformation. When we treat masturbation purely as a moral failure or a spiritual weakness, we miss the point entirely. The act itself is not the enemy, it is a mirror, and the demon is not some foreign force. It is the energy of our shadow demanding to be seen. Why does it keep returning? Why, after swearing it off, do we fall again? Why does the desire grow stronger in isolation, in shame, in silence? The answer is because the shadow, when denied, does not die. It becomes louder. Jung warned us, what you resist persists. The more we fight the demon without understanding it, the more it wraps itself around our mind. Now imagine this. Instead of running, what if you turned around and looked the demon in the eye? What if, instead of recoiling from the impulse, you asked, what do you want to show me? What pain am I running from? What void am I trying to fill? That is the beginning of transformation, not in moral perfection, but in courageous self-awareness. For many, masturbation becomes compulsive not because the body craves release, but because the soul craves connection. It's not about the physical sensation. It's about temporarily silencing the ache of unmet needs. The demon of compulsion thrives in darkness, but begins to dissolve the moment we bring light to it. This is not to say there is no discipline involved. On the contrary, discipline is crucial, but it must be born from understanding, not shame. Otherwise, your self-denial becomes another mask, and the demon simply changes shape. Real mastery, true liberation, comes from integration, not elimination. When you accept the existence of the shadow, you begin to make peace with it. You begin to own it. Think of the shadow as a wounded child within you, one who has been screaming to be acknowledged. Every time you numb yourself, you abandon that child again. But when you sit in silence, when you let yourself feel the discomfort, when you resist the urge not with clenched fists, but with curious presence, something begins to shift. That is not repression, it is transmutation. And what happens then is powerful. The demon that once chased you now begins to shrink, not because you destroyed it, but because you listened to it, you saw its face, and realized it was yours all along. That's the surprising truth, that we are not possessed by demons, we are possessed by unloved parts of ourselves, and when we finally offer them love, not indulgence, but conscious attention, they stop running wild. That is when your power returns, that is when your mind becomes your own again, because now instead of reacting blindly, you choose, you observe, you respond with strength, not brute force, but inner clarity. The journey inward is not an easy one. It will demand courage. It will ask you to sit with uncomfortable truths, but it is the only path to true freedom. And so, if you want the demons to come running, not toward you but away, stop hiding from them. Stand in your truth and shine so much light into your soul that there is no longer anywhere for them to hide. Most of us live our lives as if we are being watched, judged, and measured against some invisible standard of purity, strength, and perfection. From the time we are children, we are told what is acceptable and what is not. We are praised for being good and corrected, or even punished for revealing too much of our raw humanity, and so we learn to perform. We learn to wear masks. We split ourselves into two, the part we show the world and the part we hide away. That hidden part, the rejected self, becomes what Carl Jung called the shadow. Now think about this. What happens when the part of us that desires, that longs, that feels shame, anger, lust, or fear, is pushed down so far that even we are afraid to look at it? That part doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish into the ether. It grows stronger in the dark, and when we least expect it, it comes up, often disguised, often in compulsions, addictions, and repeated emotional patterns. This is especially true in something like masturbation, which for many is loaded with shame, secrecy, and spiritual guilt. We are told to hide it, to resist it, to conquer it, and yet, the more we fight it blindly, the more power it seems to have over us. But what if the key is not in fighting at all, but in accepting, not indulgence, acceptance? There's a difference. To accept is not to surrender or justify every impulse. To accept means to look at yourself honestly, without condemnation. It means saying, yes, this is part of me, this is where I am, and I will no longer be at war with myself. Because that internal war is what fuels the so-called demons. You don't cast them out by force. You dissolve them by becoming whole. So let's be brutally honest. Why do we fear acceptance? Because we've been taught that if we accept our flaws, we will fall into them. That if we stop feeling guilty, we'll lose our morality. But here's the truth. Shame has never healed anyone. It paralyzes, it binds, and it blinds. And the more we are ashamed of ourselves, the more power we give to the behavior we're trying to escape. Self-acceptance is the radical act of reclaiming your wholeness. When you stop running from your own nature, you begin to understand it. When you sit with the urge, when you feel it rise in your body without immediately reacting, you start to see what it's really asking for. Often, the urge to masturbate isn't just about physical pleasure, it's about soothing emotional discomfort, loneliness, boredom, stress, avoidance. These are the real demons we must learn to confront. And when you learn to accept these moments, when you stop judging yourself, you start to move from compulsion to consciousness. You may still feel the urge, but now you're watching it. You're not fused with it. You don't believe it defines you. This shift, though subtle, is everything. because it gives you back your power to choose. Now, let's take this further. Imagine a life where you could look at yourself in the mirror, in the middle of your struggle, and say, I still love you. Imagine what happens when you no longer fear your own darkness, when you can say, yes, I feel lust. Yes, I feel weakness. Yes, I've made mistakes, but none of these things cancel out my worth. That is what breaks the cycle. Not shame, not self-hatred, but compassionate awareness. This is the path of integration, and when you begin to integrate the shadow, when you bring the rejected self into the light, something incredible happens. You become stronger, you become freer. The things that once held you captive begin to lose their grip. Why? Because you're no longer feeding them with fear. Acceptance doesn't mean you stay the same. In fact, it's the first step toward real transformation. It's only when you fully see something that you can begin to change it. Otherwise, you're just running in circles, trying to fix a version of yourself that you don't even fully understand. And so, you begin to ask deeper questions. What am I truly seeking when I feel pulled toward that behavior? Is it release or is it escape? Is it pleasure or is it protection from my own pain? These questions open the door to self-awareness, and self-awareness is what truly burns through the lies we tell ourselves. Let's be clear, no one becomes free by pretending to be perfect. You become free by owning every part of who you are, and choosing to meet yourself with clarity and courage. The man who has accepted his darkness is far more powerful than the man who hides it behind spiritual masks. So when the urge comes, and it will, don't just fight it like it's your enemy. Meet it like a messenger. It's revealing something about you. It's giving you a chance to grow. And even if you fall, even if you stumble, you start again. Not from guilt, but from groundedness. That's how resilience is built. Not by always winning the fight, but by refusing to hate yourself in the process. That's the surprising truth most people never hear. Your demons aren't scared of your strength. They're scared of your compassion. Because when you finally love the part of yourself that feels broken, there's nothing left for them to feed on. And when you reach that place, when you are no longer afraid of your own nature, you don't have to chase freedom. You become it. There's a strange thing we tend to do with our lives. We separate the body from the mind, as if one is a machine and the other is a ghost floating above it. We pretend they are separate, when in reality they are deeply, inseparably connected. Everything that happens in the body echoes in the mind, and everything that stirs in the mind eventually finds its way into the body. This is especially true when it comes to something as primal and intimate as masturbation. Many people look at it as just a physical act, something trivial, meaningless, something to be hidden or dismissed, but those who struggle with it compulsively know otherwise. They know how it seeps into the mind, how it lingers, how it haunts. They know the cycles of guilt, the loss of motivation, the isolation, the sense that somehow you've handed over a part of yourself to something you can't quite see. That is not just a body reacting. That is a soul in distress. Now ask yourself, what is really happening in those moments when the urge comes? Is it just a biological call, or is there something deeper being triggered? Are you hungry for pleasure, or are you starving for peace? Is the impulse simply desire, or is it the body crying out because the mind is carrying too much weight? This is where we begin to understand the full picture. The mind and the body are in constant conversation. And when one is in pain, the other responds. If you are anxious, your breathing tightens. If you are overwhelmed, your sleep is disturbed. And when you are emotionally disconnected, your body will often search for comfort in food, in distraction, and yes, in release. Masturbation becomes a coping mechanism. not because the body is wrong, but because the mind is carrying something unresolved. It's like trying to put out a fire by covering the smoke. You may feel relief for a moment, but the deeper issue is still burning underneath. That's why many people find themselves going back to it again and again, not out of joy, but out of desperation. The body is being used as a way to numb the mind. Now here's the deeper truth. When you begin to understand the connection between the mind and the body, everything changes. Instead of fighting your urges with force, you begin to observe them. You begin to notice the patterns. What happened before the urge arose? What emotion were you trying to avoid? What conversation were you not ready to have with yourself? These are not just questions. They are doorways to liberation. What you'll often find is that the urge to masturbate arises when your mind is overwhelmed, when you feel unseen, unloved, purposeless, or simply numb. And the body becomes a tool to escape that. But what if, instead of escaping, you chose to listen? What if you saw the urge not as an enemy, but as a signal that your inner world needs attention? The key is not in shaming the body and not in suppressing the mind. The key is in creating alignment, learning how to sit with discomfort, how to breathe through temptation, how to turn inward and ask, what am I really feeling? That pause, that moment of inquiry, is the difference between slavery and freedom. You see, when the mind is chaotic, the body searches for balance. And if you have not learned how to regulate your emotions, to care for your inner world, the body will look for shortcuts. But when the mind becomes still, when it becomes attentive, curious, loving, the body no longer has to scream to be heard. The urges begin to soften because the real need is being met. The need to be present, to be seen, to be accepted by yourself. Let's be clear, there's nothing evil about the body. There's nothing shameful about desire. The problem begins when we use the body to silence the truth instead of expressing it. Every time you act without awareness, you deepen the unconscious cycle. But when you choose to pause, to notice, to breathe, you interrupt that cycle, you reclaim choice, and this is not about denying pleasure. Pleasure is not the enemy, numbness is, mindless indulgence is. Because when you're indulging without presence, without love, you're not really experiencing pleasure, you're just running from pain, and every time you do that, the connection between your body and mind grows weaker. But if you begin to use these moments as invitations, to sit with the urge, to journal, to meditate, to walk, to breathe, you'll find something powerful. The urge will transform. It won't vanish, but it will evolve. It will no longer be a master dragging you down, but a mirror reflecting what you need to face. It becomes part of your growth, not your shame. And you may ask, will the temptation ever disappear? Maybe not entirely. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to become a stone, free from desire. The goal is to become so conscious, so connected, that desire no longer controls you. You move from reaction to response, from avoidance to awareness. This is how true discipline is born, not from force, not from guilt, but from love, from the deep realization that your body deserves respect, that your mind deserves peace, and that you are capable of living in harmony with yourself. And in that harmony, the so-called demons begin to disappear, not because you chased them away, but because you no longer needed them to cope. That's the kind of strength that doesn't fade. That's the kind of power that can't be taken. Because it's not built on fear, it's built on understanding. When most people think about sexual energy, especially in the context of masturbation, they think of it as something physical, raw, instinctual, maybe even shameful. But what if that energy isn't just about the body? What if it's actually one of the most powerful forces within you, not something to repress, but something to transform? You see, sexual energy is not just about sex. It's life force energy. It's the same energy that creates art, builds empires, writes poetry, makes music, fuels innovation, and stirs the heart towards spiritual awakening. It's the fire that moves you, and depending on how you channel it, it can either burn you or build you. But here's the problem. Most of us were never taught how to use that energy. We were told to suppress it, hide it, fear it. So what happens? That energy turns inward. It becomes guilt. It becomes compulsion. It becomes a loop of indulgence followed by shame, and shame followed by indulgence. You fall, you promise never again, and the cycle continues, not because you're weak, but because no one ever showed you the way out. The real way out isn't to shut that energy off. You can't. Trying to destroy your sexual energy is like trying to kill the sun because it burns. What you can do is learn to direct it, to transmute it. Transmutation is the art of shifting energy from one form into another. It's taking that same desire, the same urge, and instead of letting it spill out in a moment of unconscious release, you turn it into something higher. You write, you train, you build, you connect, you express, you grow, and know this isn't just about productivity. It's about mastery. You become the kind of person who can feel desire fully without being ruled by it. You become aware of when the urge rises and ask yourself, not with judgment, but with clarity, what else can I do with this? You sit with it, you breathe through it, and slowly you redirect it. This is not repression. This is refinement, because when sexual energy is repressed, it mutates, it festers, it comes out in darker, more unconscious ways. But when it's transmuted, it becomes a force for transformation. You gain back the energy you were leaking through guilt, anxiety, and shame, and that energy fuels your higher self. But to transmute, you must become intentional. It requires presence. It requires awareness. The next time the urge arises, instead of reacting automatically, pause, feel it, observe where in your body you're holding tension, breathe into it, then ask yourself, what am I craving right now? If it's connection, call a friend. If it's expression, create something. If it's peace, meditate. The goal isn't to run, it's to redirect with purpose. And something miraculous begins to happen. The more you practice this, the stronger you feel. You start noticing that your mind is clearer, your energy more focused, your spirit more grounded. You wake up with more drive. You become more sensitive to beauty, to people, to possibility. That's the fire coming back, not to consume you, but to empower you. Of course, this doesn't mean the urges vanish overnight. You'll fall, you'll stumble, and that's okay. Transmutation is a practice, not a performance. The key is consistency. Every time you choose awareness over compulsion, you are rewiring your nervous system, reprogramming your mind, and reclaiming your power. Now, think about how this shifts your entire identity. No longer are you the person who is fighting lust or avoiding temptation. You're now someone who channels energy, who transforms struggle into strength. You're not escaping your nature, you're elevating it. And the truth is, this is not some mystical concept. Even ancient warriors, monks, artists, and thinkers throughout history understood the value of sexual discipline. They knew that when this energy was harnessed, not repressed, it gave them clarity, charisma, presence, and purpose. What they practiced wasn't denial, it was redirection. They use their inner fire not to burn themselves down but to light the path ahead. So ask yourself, what do you want to build? What kind of person do you want to become? Because every time the urge appears, that's the invitation, that's the test, not of your morality, but of your focus, of your direction. Are you going to let that fire burn in a dark room, or will you let it fuel your higher vision? This is where your strength begins, not by cutting yourself off from desire, but by becoming the master of it. Not a slave to pleasure, but a conscious alchemist of energy, and in that space the demons, the compulsions, the shame, the fear, they lose their grip, not because they were defeated, but because they were outgrown. One of the greatest lies we've been taught is that our impulses, our desires, and our passions are inherently wrong or sinful, that they must be subdued, hidden, or even eliminated for us to be whole. For centuries, cultures, religions, and institutions have tried to control the human experience by telling us what is acceptable and what is not. And the result is a world where we live in constant conflict with our own bodies, our own minds, and ultimately our true selves. But here's the paradox. You cannot find freedom by running away from your desires. You find freedom by embracing them. When we talk about the demon of masturbation, or any form of compulsion, it's easy to get caught up in the idea of suppression. We think the answer lies in avoiding or controlling the urges, in simply forcing ourselves to be stronger. And yes, willpower does play a role, but it's not the answer. The answer lies in understanding why the impulse arises in the first place. What is it trying to show you? What void is it trying to fill? What part of you is being neglected? The moment we stop running from our impulses and start asking ourselves those questions, we open a door to true self-awareness. The desires we so often repress are not enemies, they are messages. They are signals from our deeper selves, showing us where we feel incomplete, disconnected, or in pain. And in that pain, there is an opportunity for healing, not by denying the feeling, but by feeling it fully and allowing it to guide us toward growth. This is the crucial shift. The more we resist something, the more power we give it. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we repress or deny, teaches us that the more we try to suppress our desires, the more they manifest in ways we cannot control. The demon of masturbation, for example, is not the impulse itself. It is the way we have neglected the deeper emotional needs beneath it. It's the way we've distanced ourselves from our own truths and desires. Think about the people who struggle with compulsive behaviors. Whether it's masturbation, overeating, or substance abuse, the core issue is the same: the inability to sit with and confront discomfort. When we feel overwhelmed or emotionally blocked, the instinct is to escape through pleasure, distraction, or indulgence. The key to breaking free isn't through avoiding these things, it's through confronting them. It's through learning to sit with our discomfort instead of running from it. Here's the truth: you are not a broken person because you experience these desires. You're not unworthy. The fact that you have sexual urges or emotional needs does not make you flawed. It makes you human. What truly matters is what you do with them. Do you allow them to control you? Do you give them the power to rule your life, your choices, your sense of self-worth? Or do you choose to respond with awareness and intention, knowing that you are the master of your experience? This is where true strength lies, not in denial, but in conscious engagement. Not in pushing away your desires, but in recognizing them for what they are. And when you begin to understand that the desire for release is often tied to deeper emotional truth, loneliness, fear, or pain. You begin to see that the solution is not in running from the desire, but in addressing the source. If you take a moment to pause when that urge rises within you, and instead of reacting automatically, you ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What am I avoiding? What need is unaddressed? You may be surprised by the answers that arise. You may realize that what you truly need is not release, but connection. You may realize that what you're seeking in that moment is not pleasure, but the courage to face your own vulnerability, your own insecurities. The more you do this, the more you build a deeper relationship with yourself. You stop being a prisoner to your own desires. You stop being a victim of your impulses, and you start to become the witness. You start to see that every desire, every urge, is an opportunity to step closer to who you truly are. You no longer have to be ruled by your needs, but you can choose to respond to them with wisdom and compassion. This is not about moral perfection or spiritual ascension. It's not about denying the body's needs or denying the human experience. It's about integration, about accepting the fullness of who you are, not with shame, but with love. You begin to see that your body is not something to be controlled or suppressed. It is a partner in your journey, a messenger of deeper truths that are often buried beneath the surface. And this is why understanding the emotional root of your compulsions is so powerful. Because it means that you no longer need to act in blind reaction. Instead, you can choose to meet your needs directly. If it's intimacy you crave, find ways to connect with others, whether it's a close friend, a partner, or even engaging in activities that nurture your soul. If it's peace you seek, begin a practice of mindfulness or meditation to find stillness. If it's emotional release you need, write it out, talk it through, or engage in physical activity to move the energy in your body. As you begin to make these conscious choices, something miraculous happens. You become more grounded in yourself. Your worth is no longer tied to your actions or your behaviors. You no longer see yourself as bad or weak because of your desires. Instead, you start to understand that you are whole, you are worthy, and your desires are just one part of a complex and beautiful human experience. When you stop running from your impulses and start listening to them, they stop controlling you. They become tools for growth rather than sources of shame. And as you begin to integrate your desires, you begin to step into your true power. Not the power that comes from control or suppression, but the power that comes from acceptance, understanding, and mastery. This is the kind of freedom that can only come when you embrace your full humanity, and this is the gift that comes when you no longer see yourself as broken, but as whole. You are not defined by your desires. You are the one who chooses how to respond to them. And in that choice lies the freedom to live authentically, to be at peace with yourself, and to become the person you were always meant to be. We live in a world that often values surface-level achievements over the deeper work of self-awareness. We are bombarded with images of success, perfection, and control, and these images feed into a narrative that we must be flawless, both externally and internally. This narrative tells us that anything less than perfect means failure, and failure means unworthiness. So, we strive for a standard that is not only impossible, but in many ways, completely disconnected from our true nature. But the truth is that perfection is a myth. It is a story we've been told, and we've been conditioned to believe it. And the problem with believing in this myth is that it leads to a constant cycle of shame, guilt, and avoidance. When we fall short of this mythical standard, whether it's in our relationships, our careers, or our personal behaviors, we feel as though we are unworthy of love, respect, or success. We feel broken, and from that feeling of brokenness, we try to fix ourselves by engaging in endless loops of self-criticism, denial, and struggle. In the case of masturbation or any behavior we deem shameful, this pattern becomes especially pronounced. We start to feel that we are somehow less than, that something in us is inherently wrong because we can't seem to meet the ideal standards of purity or control. And so, we hide, we suppress. We run away from our own humanity, thinking that we can fix the problem by pretending it doesn't exist, by shoving it down into the dark corners of our minds. But here's the truth: that approach never works. Suppression only leads to more suppression. It leads to a deepening of the internal divide between who we really are and who we pretend to be. And in that divide, in that gap, the demons, those destructive impulses, grow stronger. Why? Because we've refused to look at them. We've refused to see the reality of our own complexity. And in doing so, we give the shadows more room to control us. True freedom doesn't come from running away from our flaws. It comes from confronting them, understanding them, and integrating them into our lives in a healthy way. This is where the idea of wholeness comes into play. It's about accepting every part of who you are, the light and the dark, the virtues and the flaws. It's about recognizing that the parts of yourself that you want to hide or reject are not the enemy. They are part of the whole picture, and when you accept them, you begin to reclaim the power you've been giving away in your struggle to control them. When you no longer judge yourself for your desires, when you no longer label yourself as bad for having a human experience, you start to experience a profound shift. You begin to experience self-compassion, a way of treating yourself with the kindness, patience, and understanding that you would offer a friend who is struggling. Instead of seeing your weaknesses as things to be ashamed of, you begin to view them as opportunities for growth. And in this space, the power of self-acceptance is what allows you to break free from the destructive patterns that once held you captive. So, instead of trying to perfect yourself, you begin to aim for wholeness. Instead of judging your urges, you begin to acknowledge them with curiosity and compassion. You ask, what is this teaching me? What do I need to learn from this experience? And in doing so, you stop seeing yourself as broken, because you recognize that being human means having both strength and vulnerability, light and dark, pleasure and pain. These parts are not in conflict with each other, they coexist. And when you learn to embrace both, you come into your full power. One of the greatest shifts comes when you realize that you are worthy not because of your ability to meet some unattainable standard, but simply because you exist. You are worthy because you are human. You are worthy because you are learning, growing, and seeking. The journey of self-awareness is not about perfection, it is about progress. It is about continuously moving closer to a place of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-understanding. And when you understand yourself, when you know your desires, your flaws, your struggles, and your strengths, you begin to live more authentically. You stop pretending to be something you're not, and you stop running from the parts of yourself that scare you. Instead, you stand in your truth, fully, and with the courage to look at every aspect of your being with unconditional love. This is why self-acceptance is the key to breaking the cycle of shame, because when you accept yourself as you are, you stop fighting yourself. You stop reinforcing the belief that you are unworthy or broken. You stop believing that you need to be perfect to be worthy of love or success. You realize that your worth is inherent. It doesn't depend on your behaviors, your actions, or your ability to fit into someone else's idea of perfection. You are already whole, and when you live from this place of wholeness, everything changes. The demons of shame, guilt, and addiction lose their power because you no longer feed them with fear. You no longer feed them with self-judgment. Instead, you feed yourself with love, understanding, and acceptance, and in doing so, you break free. The freedom that comes from self-acceptance is liberating. It's the kind of freedom that allows you to live authentically without the constant fear of judgment, without the pressure of perfection, and without the weight of shame. You are no longer bound by the idea that you must be something other than who you are. You can simply be, and in that being, you discover your true strength, your true power, and your true potential. So the question is, what if you allowed yourself to be whole? What if you stopped fighting your desires and started embracing them with love and curiosity? What would happen if you stopped seeing yourself as flawed and began to see yourself as human, worthy, and complete? Because the truth is, you are worthy, you are whole, and you are more than enough.